When we were young, we read more often because we had to. It was the only way for us to get knowledge and to be enlightened. Read to your heart's delight and be enlightened. Let's just read. It's a podcast by Andy's Personal Development. Stay tuned for more reading and enlightenment. Hey, and welcome to this episode of Let's Just Read. I am your host, Andy Charles of Andy's Personal Development, and we are very happy to be here live with you for this particular episode. It is entitled The Legacy of Writer Jennifer S. Brown, and we are looking forward to sharing with her the next 35 minutes or so as we focus on her legacy with regards to the work that she has done thus far as a writer. So in 2016, Jennifer S. Brown made a splash in the historical fiction world with her acclaimed debut, Modern Girls. Now the USA Today bestseller is back to explore the world of gangsters and speakeasies in her highly anticipated sophomore novel, The Whisper Sister. On sale from September 3rd, 2024, published by Lake Union Publishing, also Paperback. And we have in the studio with us live Jennifer S. Brown as she shares her information, her life, her experience, and her writing with us, entitled The Legacy of Writer Jennifer S. Brown. Here's our guest. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. It's so good to have you. We appreciate you and we appreciate the work that you have done thus far. So, Jennifer, tell us, when did you decide that it was important, it was necessary, ideally, for you to become a writer and to get published?
Well, the writer part, I can't think of a time when I wasn't writing. I was one of those kids. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Harriet the Spy, but it
Yes.
was a young woman or a girl, who had a notebook and took notes on everything. And she was my hero. I mean, it didn't turn out so well because she often didn't write the nicest things, but I just started writing. And I remember in elementary school making, the kind of rookie mistakes that any young writer might like. And then she woke up and it was all a dream. But I loved the idea of being able to create worlds. I don't think I really thought about publishing until I got older, and I worked in editorial at some publishing companies. And I thought, why can't I, right? Why can't I do that?
Why
Uh,
not indeed?
yeah. And so I went to graduate school in Seattle, Washington, to get my master's in creative writing. And that was amazing because it introduced me to, you know, all these new authors and all these new genres. And it really opened me up to how books can just not only, transport you into a story, but can teach you so much.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I took a class in post-colonial literature, and I discovered authors I had never heard of, in my youth. Um, and it's the first time I read magic realism, like Ben Okri's The Famished Road. Um, and it kind of blew my mind that books could have so many layers. And so I wanted to do that too. Um, and I'd like to hopefully be encouraging to those who would like to write, in that um, I finished my MFA in 1996 and I published a book in 2016. So
Yes.
we're talking many years. It's not something that can just happen
Yeah,
overnight.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
I was in my 40s, so there's no reason for anyone to not do it if they want to.
Exactly. All right. We thank you for sharing, Jennifer. We appreciate that. We like the passion in your voice as well, and the outlook on your face. It's really positive and engaging. Before we get into the actual publications, I'd like to focus on your style of writing. What
Mhm.
would you say enhanced or encouraged or impacted the most on the style of writing that you have now engaged in?
I think a lot of it has to do with what I've read. I write historical fiction, and I credit a lot of that to my grandfather. He was such an avid reader. He subscribed to the New Yorker magazine, which is of course weekly, and he couldn't keep up with them, but so he had stacks of them at home, and he
All
would
right.
read them cover to cover. And he shared that with me, and so I think that, he really influenced me. He gave me a lot of books that he had loved. Um, my parents were very supportive. I was always allowed to check anything I wanted out of the library, even in the adult section when I wasn't supposed to be old enough to be in the adult section. So I think that absorbing all of these, Sherwood Anderson I really liked, and I've always been a Dorothy Parker fan, which I think influences the time periods I write about.
Okay, great, wonderful. So you began with Modern Girls.
Hmm.
Where did the inspiration come from for you to create this publication?
So when I was pregnant with my first child,
Uh huh.
um, I had to go in for, I was considered advanced age, and I had to go to the doctor.
Hmm.
Um, and they said, you have extra tests you have to do. And they had this
Right.
really long form. And so I called my
Hmm.
parents, and I said to, each of them, can you tell me all the history? And my father just mentioned offhand, he said, well, my grandmother had uterine cancer. My mom
Hmm.
always said it was because of the abortion, but I don't think that there's a link. And I was
Uh-huh.
shocked. I had no idea. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, it was the 1930s. And my impression was they simply couldn't afford. I mean, they were immigrants, making a living. And so
Hmm.
Modern Girls is about unwanted pregnancies during the Depression. It takes place
Oh,
in like just a month of August 1935,
right.
because, it really made me think, what did, you know, a lot of these things we think of as modern problems, right? Like unwanted pregnancy is something people deal with today, but they also dealt with it, you know, all
Way
the
back
way
then
back.
as well.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I
Yeah.
studied
Yeah.
a lot, and I was fascinated. So I decided to write Modern Girls to explore the idea.
Okay. So here's the thing with regards to the cover, and I
Hmm.
just want to pull it up here so that people can see. I want us to look at the cover, and I want you to tell us what inspired this picture here, because the theme is modern girls, but as you just alluded to, this picture does not show anything modern, but it's
Well, it was
contemporary with going back. And I mean, in terms of the time frame, that's what I'm looking at. It's kind of abstract in the sense. So the term modern girls is apt, but how did you get the impression to put this cover in? Was it something that you came up with, or the publication team, or the whole idea? What did you want it to convey?
the publisher did it. It was their idea.
Ah,
And,
yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
thing I didn't, it's a hard one to do, but one of my main characters, Dottie, loves
Uh-huh.
her career. And that was actually based on my own grandmother, um,
Oh,
who was a bookkeeper in the 1930s. And
oh,
actually, Dottie does some of the same work. My grandmother
right.
loved numbers, and she
Okay.
loved working. So that's, yeah, I had, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful. So, what was the response that you got back from this publication? What did people say about it? What was the thoughts that they shared with you?
Well, so a couple things. One of the things that made me the most happy to hear is it's the story
Uh-huh.
of a Jewish immigrant family. And people said to
Ah,
me, if it were Greek instead of Jewish, this is my family. Or if it was Italian instead of Jewish, like my family has these same stories. So I
right, right, right.
loved that it was a universal, that, money immigrants have, the same stories, in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that to me, and because it's about unwanted pregnancy, I was very surprised when I went out how many people confided to me afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
about things that had happened to them or their parents, and I
Yeah.
loved that it opened up a discussion.
Wow. So let me just read a little bit here.
Hmm.
And it says when Minnie Sofna's family arrives at Ellis Island from Ukraine, she realizes life in 1920 New York City isn't what she dreamed it would be. She sleeps on the kitchen floor, only speaks Yiddish, as you just alluded to, and is placed in a class with much younger kids at school. Minnie, however, works hard to fit in and truly become an American. This kind of focuses on a normal picture that people can get in their
Hmm.
mind of folks leaving other countries to come to America
Hmm.
and get involved in the American dream per se. I get that. Is that the whole idea or concept for this particular part that we just read?
So the Whisper Sister, yeah, Minnie's the lead character of the Whisper Sister, and the assimilation is a huge part because
Mhm.
she comes over when she's about 10, and you know back in I have her come from Ukraine. People talk about the streets paved with gold and all the wonderful things about America, and of course that's a dream. And she gets here and she doesn't quite feel Ukrainian, but she doesn't feel
Mhm.
American.
Mhm.
It's a very different culture. Judaism is practiced differently in the Lower East
Mhm.
Side. Like not everybody can observe the same way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I visited the Tenement Museum in New York for some of my research, and one of the things that made an impression on me is when Jewish people observe the Sabbath, which is from Friday night to Saturday night, you don't do any work, right?
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
a lot,
Yeah.
like most people's Sundays.
Yeah.
But there was a special blessing that like observant parents would say for their children who had to work, because if they didn't work on Saturdays, they'd be fired, and if they were fired,
Mm.
nobody could support the family, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
there had to be assimilation. So that is the immigration part is a huge piece, and where you feel like in the world, like where your place is in the world, and who your people are.
Wow. So this is the cover of The Whisper Sister.
Hmm.
What inspired the cover? Was it the the publication team again, or did you had an input?
I definitely had input on this one because the Minnie becomes she takes over her father's illegal bar, because during Prohibition, which was 1920
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
1933, alcohol was forbidden in the United States.
Yes.
But there was a
Yes.
huge underworld. And so um, I wanted something that, showed a speakeasy. And speakeasies often have these little doors that they could peer out of to see who was
Mm-hmm.
coming in. Um,
Yeah.
and I sort of wanted like the bar in the background. So I definitely, we went through a whole lot of covers, and we finally um, came to some compromises and agreed on this one. So I think,
Wow.
I hope it evokes the speakeasy.
Ah, okay. Okay. I get it. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Jennifer. With regards to the first publication, did you have the opportunity to do any live book talks and engage with people and tell them the story from your heart or from your perspective based on the research and stuff?
I did. I
I
was.
see.
I
Yeah.
actually toured all over, and it was really fun because when you're in person, you can have a screen, and you can show all the
Yeah.
research you did, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so many things that I put into the novels come from my own family, and
Right.
it's really exciting to share that and to teach people who think they know all about their own families. Um,
Yes.
you know, the there's a camp called Camp Eden in
Mm-hmm.
the novel Modern Girls, and it was a
Yeah.
Jewish socialist camp for not kids but for young adults, and
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of them. But Camp Eden was a smaller one that I sent them to, and I was able to show audiences pictures because my own grandparents met at Camp Eden, and I was able to
Yeah.
show them pictures there from the late 1920s, early 1930s. So that was exciting to be able to share that with
Wow.
people.
Yes. Yes. Good. Thank you for sharing, Jennifer. Now, this was supposed to have been released on the 3rd of September.
Mhm.
How did it go? Did you enjoy the experience?
I loved it. We held a launch at my favorite bookstore, Belmont Books in Massachusetts, and
Uh
um, because it's about because it's about a Jewish family. First of all, I baked rugula, which is the little pastry that's wrapped up with
huh.
chocolate or cinnamon,
Hmm.
and knishes, which are like um, little potato. They're potatoes with dough.
Yeah.
They're kind of small, so I baked those. And then because it was a speakeasy, my husband and I made a cocktail in advance. We batched it and we had those at the launch, and people just loved that. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I was in conversation with a friend, and we took questions, and it was very very exciting. I've actually said before, book lunches are almost like weddings, but it's only you. You're the focus. It's you and your book, because everyone's there for you and for your book, and it's a great feeling.
Lovely, lovely. And we have 6 days gone since that has happened. What is the response thus far? What kind of feedback are you getting?
I'm getting great feedback.
There you go.
I'm getting feedback. People are saying like I meant to go to sleep at 9 o'clock, but
Uh-huh.
I had to read more. Or
Right, right,
you
right.
know, some people have told me it made them cry because there are some sad points, and I love that.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, One of my books can get emotion out of
Evoke that kind
people.
of emotion.
That's
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I have interviewed a lot of writers, and the last guy I interviewed, he said that he preferred that people read the book in parts rather than rush through the whole book, not being able to sleep. And by the time the book is over, they don't want to go back to it again. What would you prefer in terms of the way people respond to reading your book? That they read
Um,
it? What would you
I
prefer?
mean, my preference is people read it, which like, I just want people to read it, whatever way is most
Uh-huh.
comfortable. For me,
Uh-huh.
when I'm reading, especially historical fiction, because I'm so immersed in this new world,
Ah,
like I want to
yeah.
stay with it. I want to keep reading because it's sort of a jolt when you come back
Right.
to reality, and it's like, wait,
Right.
this is 2024. It's not 1837 or whatever book I'm reading.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing, Jennifer. Would you consider, or have you been approached, or was there ever an opportunity for your first writing to be a mini television series, or maybe even evolve into a movie?
I was approached once, but it didn't happen. It would be I think it would
Didn't
be a
pan out.
great miniseries. Um,
Yeah.
but maybe it'll still get picked up. Who knows? And I
Yeah.
think the
Yeah.
Whisper Sister could be a really fun
Yeah.
movie or
Yeah.
miniseries.
Yeah. 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 It tells an intriguing story and definitely would draw that kind of response from people. They want to get
Hmm.
soaked in, and after the first episode, they want to get to see what's happening on the next and so on as we go along. Great. Wonderful. Are there any other works in the future, Jennifer? Some ideas or thoughts brewing that you'd like to produce another writing again?
Yes, I've actually been working on my next novel, which it's funny. My
Wow.
first novel took place in 1935, and
Uh
then
huh.
this one took place from 1920, 1933, and the one before it's going back farther, so it starts in 1911, and it
Wow.
actually takes place in Florida. So
Okay.
I love the history. It's just so
Hmm.
fascinating, and in the next book, I'm touching on, I don't know how to phrase this, but it has a lot of, when Miami Beach was first founded, it was restricted, and you and I were not allowed to live there, buy property there, uh, and so it deals a lot with um, Jewish people trying to find their way in a place that
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
want them there.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. I get it. That's interesting. Wow. Okay. So, do you have a favorite writer? Is there anyone that has influenced you so much that you maybe have read most of their publications?
That's a tough one because it's changed over the years. When I was in college, like I read everything by Milan Kundera, who is a
Okay.
Czech/French writer. Um,
Hmm.
and I tried to sort of do things in his style. But like I said, it took 20 years to get my book out there. So perhaps he wasn't the best role model for me. Um,
Uh,
I love historical fiction, and so it would be hard to pinpoint um, one one book I loved. There are a few. There are uh, the ice cream queen of Orchard Street. I believe the
mm-hmm.
author's name is Sue Gilman. I'd have to check that out. But
Right.
that one made a big impression on me, and I think that was the first one where I said, "This is great," because it was a Jewish community. It was in New York. It was a fascinating story about this woman who goes from rags to riches, and that one really stuck with me. But I read so much. I just finished one that took place in the 1960s by Sarah Goodman Confino called Behind Every Good Man, which was
Yeah.
funny. It was so
Yeah.
funny
Yeah.
and fun. I'm reading one that takes place now around the 1900s called The 13th Husband by Greer McAllister. So
Wow.
every time I think I read a new book, I'm like, oh, look at this. I love the way they do this. Or, oh, I like that structure. Or, wow, they really do their, and it makes me want to do that, not the same thing, but
Mm,
like, I want to build
yeah.
up the settings that, like they did it, or, have more dialogue like they do. So I think every time you read a book, you get something new out of it.
Yes, indeed. I've experienced that a lot,
Hmm.
quite a lot. Yeah, and sometimes what you realize by reading it, maybe a second or third time, it surprises you that, wait a minute, how come I didn't see this before? How come I didn't
Yes.
observe this before? So yes, that makes it even more intriguing. In terms of your world philosophy, do you have an association with the Greek side of philosophy? Is it maybe a Mahatma Gandhi style of philosophy? Or maybe it is Jewish based. I don't know. But what is your basic philosophy in life, and what is the influence of that philosophy?
I think that it does come mostly from the Jewish culture.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and I think that it's really, um, it's really important to be constantly learning. And
Hmm.
it's really important to be learning what you want, right? You can't
Yeah.
judge someone else because their differences lie elsewhere.
Yeah.
When my kids were young, some people would be like, "That what are they reading? It's junk." I'm like, "It's
Hmm.
not junk. It interests them." They like graphic novels for a while. I'm like, "It's great. They're
Yeah.
reading. They're pursuing
Yeah.
their interests." Um, and the other thing I really believe, which is a big theme in the book, is home is where you find it, right? It's not necessarily somewhere, like with your people. Like you can find other people and they can become so close to you that they are your community. That community can be found anywhere. You just have to try.
Yeah. I love that outlook. It's healthy. Thank you so much. When you look at the aspects of historical fiction as a genre for writing, do you see anyone in the lead as a household name or someone through the ages that you have really admired, but they seem to have gone to a higher level in terms of that genre, fictional history writing? Anyone at all that comes to mind?
Well, Amor Towles, who's I think his latest book was The Lincoln Highway. He did A Gentleman in Moscow, and he did The Rules of
Yeah,
Civility. I
yeah,
think he's probably one of the best known historical writers. Um, but then there are people like Anita Diamant, who broke out with a book called The Red Tent, which was a historical novel based on two lines of the
yes,
Torah, of the Old
yes,
Testament.
yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
and I think she's fairly well known. She wrote her more recent historical fiction is called The Boston Girl. So I think when I think like who's really popular, I think of them.
Wow. Okay. So I'm just going to put up some information here on the screen, and I think it really tells the individuals who may be looking, or we have a couple people in the audience. Tell them which one is the most effective one that they can get your publication or make contact with you, and then we'll continue.
I think the web page Jennifer S. Brown, just because there's a contact form on there that I will see right away,
Right,
and it has all my
right.
books and all my other writing on there. And you
Okay.
can't forget the S because Jennifer Brown is one of the most common names in the world, in America, I should say. Everybody in my class in elementary school, there were always like five Jennifers. So you need the S. And of course, Brown is not exactly an unusual last name.
Right, right, right. Okay, great, wonderful. So, with regards to the influence of AI, we know that there are so many platforms out there, so many different areas that AI come into the play. Does it help you anywhere in your research and your development and the grooming of your techniques? Do you engage in the use of a lot of AI?
Not a lot. I have
Mhm.
used it in things like I wanted to know what my character might be reading in
Yeah.
1915. So I'd say to
Uh-huh.
AI, like, what were the most popular books in 1915? It's a lot easier than like sort of digging through a lot of
Right.
things. And um, I think I had one that was, I think, how do you use a kerosene stove? Things like that. But
Yes.
I don't use it
Yes.
for any actual writing. It's
Right.
most of my research comes from books, newspapers. I use newspapers all the time. I love reading old newspapers and magazines and talking to people. There's actually a scene in The Whisper Sister where her brother is is being asked to be a messenger and carry things that aren't exactly legal. And my father-in-law told me that his uncle used to have to do that, and he put things in a violin case because nobody stops
Wow.
somebody with a violin case. So those are
Yeah.
like wonderful little details that you can't really get from AI.
Uh-huh.
So it's sort of a backup from
Wow.
my other sources.
Okay. Okay. It's that's really interesting. So, Jennifer, when you hear the name Stephen King, there's an association with all this dark, deep, fictional stuff, and George Lucas. You know exactly what you're thinking about. When people hear the name Jennifer S. Brown, what do you want them to think about? What do you want to come to mind when they hear your name as part of your legacy?
I think I would like them. First of all, I'd like them to think of a writer they really enjoy reading. Um, but I think that my novels tend to be very feminist,
Uh-huh.
very liberal, and
Yes.
so I hope that they would think of me as someone who opened up a new way of thinking, like when they're looking at
Uh-huh.
immigrants or at unwanted pregnancy, or my next book with the um, anti-Semitism. So I would like to that they think of me as somebody who shows them a new way to look at things.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna ask you some questions, and it's a little fun time, really, actually, that
Okay.
I engage most of my guests in terms of, and this is probably from a more North American perspective than it is a Jewish, because I'm trying to figure out something Jewish in my mind, but it's not coming. It's not coming. All right. So in terms of food,
Mhm.
if you had a choice between ham and cheese and peanut butter and jelly, which one would you choose?
Well, I don't eat meat, so that's an easy one.
There you
Peanut butter
go.
and jelly, and ham and cheese is very, very much not kosher because
Yes,
Jewish people don't
exactly.
eat pigs and they don't
Yeah,
mix milk and meat.
there you go. I knew it. 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 Are you into sport by chance, Jennifer?
I'm into American football.
Oh,
I
the
am a
NFL.
the NFL. I have been a fan of the Miami Dolphins since I don't even know, because my grandfather was a
Mm,
fan. I grew up in
mhm.
South Florida, as I said.
Yeah,
And so he would take me to the games from a very
yeah,
young age. And
yeah,
it stuck. It stuck. Yeah, we play a game
yeah.
tomorrow night. I'm very excited.
Yes, you're with Tyreek and Tua. Mm.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Look at, do you
I
watch
wonder how.
football?
Yeah, I wonder how far they'll get this time.
Fingers crossed. My husband says, I had to get Sunday ticket because I don't live in Florida, so I missed the games. And,
Oh.
I was like, I should only be paying for half because I watch the games like this, because I'm
Ah,
like, oh, so like I only really see half the game. I should only have to pay half for the
okay.
Sunday ticket.
Yeah, yeah,
But yes,
yeah.
I am a diehard Dolphins fan, and I have pass that on to my daughter, who's also a diehard
Hmm.
Dolphins fan.
Right, right. That's good. That's good. And finally, with regards to the influx of social media platforms, we have two main characters. One is Apple, that focuses on creating more consumer friendly stuff. They're more people oriented. And then we have Microsoft, who is focused on research and development. Which one would you prefer?
Definitely. Oh, wait, now I'm thinking about it because I love research.
Mm,
I love the research, but I also
yeah.
love, you know, being with people and getting out
Uh
there
huh.
and doing things. But I think, I think probably the research, the Microsoft, because,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, if I put it in a book, hopefully other people will get it,
Read. Yeah.
rather than being me out there. So I want the book out
Okay.
there.
Okay. So here's one of the biggest questions that I ask. When you look at what is happening in the world from a writer's perspective, do you think that there's anything that you can put out there that can create a sense of healing? Because I believe that that is absolutely necessary when we look at so much negativity that's happening in the world today. What's your what's your take on that?
I absolutely think you can put work out there that's healing. I'm actually part of an anthology. I wrote an essay for an anthology that's coming out in October on ebook and November in paperback. That's about being Jewish now. It's the name of it, on being Jewish now, because it's very, very complex world for being
Yeah.
Jewish right now. Um,
Wow.
and I hope that people will read that book, and connect and say, look at all the different facets there are of being Jewish and all the different ways of finding that community and that connection. And it doesn't have to be necessarily just going to synagogue and saying prayers. And so, yeah, I got really excited when I was asked to um, write an essay, and I wrote about how I found my community. Um, it sounds strange, but I write bereavement letters for my synagogue, but it's really made me feel closer to so many people. So I absolutely think that writing can be healing, and there are definitely books, that I've read because I just wanted to feel better, you know. And
Okay.
sometimes it's a rom com novel because it just cheers you up, or sometimes it's, a nonfiction. Uh, the guide, like the Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking, um, made me feel better about people in my family who were ill. Like, so, absolutely.
Okay. So in terms of, let's just imagine you had the opportunity to make a statement. You had this grand megaphone and you could reach almost 8 billion people, which is roughly the world population right now. From a writer's perspective, what would you say to them?
I would say, treat each other better, and I hope I
Yeah.
convey that in my book, but just nothing, you just need to respect each other and treat each
Yeah.
other with, it doesn't have to be kindness. You just don't, disparage, don't, you know, I feel like the world is a very violent place right now, and
Wow.
it's very upsetting. And so I just wish everybody would, be respectful to each other.
Okay. Wonderful. So, on that note, folks, we have come to the end of this very engaging and intriguing episode of The Legacy of Writer Jennifer S. Brown. She has two publications. One recently came out on September 3rd, and you need to go check them out. The information there is on the screen. And we thank you very much for being with us on this episode of Let's Just Read. As we leave, we want to remind you that you need to read more for enlightenment, for knowledge, for information, and for your own personal growth. It also helps, especially when we are beginning to go over into the 40s and the 50s of our lives, to be more engaged so that we you try to get away from some of the strange diseases that people get as they age with regards to life and lifestyle and what have you. So, Until next time, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development, together with my guest, Jennifer S. Brown, saying so long, Godspeed, God bless, Shalom, Namaste. Bye for now, guys.